there. Come have a seat with me. Let's talk about something that I think is important. And you will too. Webster tells us that human trafficking is the unlawful act of transporting or coercing people, in order to benefit from their work or service, typically in the form of like forced labor or, sexual exploitation. In today's society, it plays out in the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring or receipt of people through, force, fraud, deception, with the aim of exploiting them, for profit. So men, women, children, even of all ages and from all backgrounds can become victims of this crime, which occurs in every region of the world. In the US, the number one state actually for trafficking is California, where I live. It is said to be the worst in offender and violations, due in part, to the fact that California is the most popular state in the country. Traffickers target, vulnerable people who have needs that the traffickers can fill. The needs might be emotional, romantic connection, familial love, belonging, acceptance. The need also might be practical. It could be work, food, shelter. Traffickers, promise to meet the needs in order to exert control and create dependence. The most common ways traffickers control victims are through threats or economic abuse. Immigrants are vulnerable, to labor trafficking because many have come to the U.S., due to violence or severe poverty, in their home countries. They might make threats like, if you, complain, I will call ICE, making it extremely powerful. Overall, it is a severe form of exploitation that can take many forms, including sex trafficking, which involves forcing someone to engage in commercial sex. There's also, they've given the name children or child trafficking, is known as commercial sexual exploitation. Then there is, labor, which involves forcing someone to work or provide, services. This can include domestic servitude, when someone is forced to do domestic chores like cleaning, laundry and caring for children or elderly, family members for little or no pay. Debt bondage, when someone is forced, to work to pay off a debt, a loan or other obligation. Child labor, when children are brought into and sold, employers, or when parents even sell their children to traffickers. Forced marriage, that goes beyond arranged marriages, where the future, husband and wife do not have the final say, even whether or not the wedding is performed. Forced crime involves forcing someone to commit crimes, like begging, pickpocketing, um, selling drugs, or bag snatching, even. This can occur within and across borders and can victimize people of, all ages, races, and genders, right? Federal government, officials have put together special task forces to input the 4 Ps, they call it, which is protection, prevention, prosecution, and partnership. It's for victims and survivors. For a strengthened response, with the public, because excuse me, my hair keeps flying with my face. Because, the reality is when a group of people begin trafficking, it is for more than one type as well. We all know people get cocky, greedy, and even messy because when someone feels, shortchanged or gets caught with their hands dirty, they are quick to roll over and strike a deal, which obviously includes, telling on others to save their own ass. It could even be a relationship, emotions running high, and they just want revenge, especially if that gets them in the spotlight. After facing multiple charges and lawsuits in recent months, I can name a few examples of high profile names that you most certainly have heard of for just that, even. So, beginning with P. Diddy, aka Sean Combs, who was indicted last month on charges of sex trafficking, by force, racketeering, conspiracy, fraud, coercion, and transportation. Get this, for prostitution to a reporter. Um, his attorney, Mark Agnefello, has called it an unjust prosecution to report, even quoted as saying his client is an innocent man with nothing to hide. Yet, the numbered amount and seriousness of the charges have to be coming from somewhere, right? This is often, or after, excuse me, Cassandra, Cassie Ventura kicked off what became a tsunami of accusations against Diddy with a lawsuit in New York federal court. I am paraphrasing. Her complaint against her ex boyfriend that he would, quote, force her to have sex with male sex workers while he watched. It is not even the first controversy the music mogul has faced over the years. Sean Combs has changed his name several times over the years and even attempted to rebrand himself as Brother Love. Is it because he was feeling uncomfortable in his own skin? Because no matter what name he uses, he has repeatedly been accused of having violent encounters with everyone from his exes, Cassie and even Gina, who alleged physical abuse back in 2019. But also executive Steve Stout and rappers J. Cole and Drake. Diddy continues to fiercely deny, and now through his attorney, these offensive, even outrageous allegations, multiples of them. He has been subjected to Miss Cassie's persistent demand of 30 million, uh, under the threat of writing a damaging tell-all book. She's saying, you give me that much, I won't write it, about their relationship, which was, quote, unequivocally, rejected as blatant blackmail. Despite withdrawing, though, her initial threat, she has now resorted to filing a lawsuit, and now several others have decided to do the same. His attorney accepted an interview even with Rolling Stone to say that it was only aiming to tarnish Mr. Combs' reputation and seeking a payday. But federal court, I would be careful to be confident in only what the truth is because it always comes out, especially with this level of investigation and the numbers. Do you guys remember Heidi Fleiss, Madam to the Stars? She was so sure of herself that it was who she knew and how much she thought could buy her immunity, even, and was wrong. She ran an upscale prostitution ring, based in Los Angeles. Fleiss has stated she got lost in the appeal because, um, she made her first million after only about 4 months in the business. as a madam, and that on her slowest night, she made as much as $10,000. Her business began to unravel completely, though, when she was arrested and had to spend $1 million just to post her bail. Federal charges were filed, and she was convicted of tax evasion. She spent almost 2 of her 7 year sentence, then released, to a halfway house to complete 370 hours of community service. She said the fines damn near broke her, and later she wrote a book about it titled Pandering. Last I heard, she was facing charges once again when she was found by Nevada police with nearly 400 marijuana plants growing at her home. And they were submitted, or excuse me, they submitted, their report to the district attorney's office. So, drug trafficking is the illegal transporting or transacting in a controlled substance. Under California law versus, each state to state varies a little, but it's pretty similar. Starting with just marijuana alone, though, you may legally process and keep the entire harvest from said plants. However, cultivate, cultivating more than 6 marijuana plants will remain as a drug crime. It will also become more serious if the person found has a conviction on their record, for a serious felony or a sex crime, or at least 2 prior convictions for cultivating more than 6 plants, and or they violate state or federal environmental laws, But next, under federal law, though, any person knowing or intentionally manufacturing, distributing, dispensing, or possessing with intent a controlled substance is a whole lot more serious. The penalty with drugs alone, or even in combination with any other type of trafficking, which is very common, has a mandatory sentence. On your first offense, it's 10 years to life. If death or even a serious injury occurs during the crime, it's 20 to life. And the fines start at 10 million if a person, but 50 million if it's a group, like organized crime. The woman, ultimately, to turn human trafficking, though, on its ear with the greater greed and numbers of people, drugs, sex, money, was none other than Aileen Wuornos. Her troubled past and the trauma she first endured for, shelling it out is a cautionary tale. It brings some, or excuse me, I will bring, some of it to light to provide a glimpse of what shaped the dark path. The complex web, uh, psychological, emotional, and societal, influence, even that contributed to her descent into violence, cannot be overlooked. Although they do not absolve her, and the responsibility of her actions too, she remains a controversial figure, and there is much, discussion even still about the nature of her crimes, capital punishment, and the systematic failures even that allow her life to dwindle to such a severe degree. The revelation of shocking conspiracy theories, which created outrage, skepticism, regarding fairness and objection, during her trial, too. A lot of her story serves as a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of a life marred by attack, neglect, and the severe trauma, and her chilling testimony to the fact that the human psyche, can be shaped, then driven to extreme acts under the weight of unbearable circumstances. Her story has been resold, though, many times by even police officers. The case shifted from focus on justice, to the exploitation of Eileen's story, leaving, many to question the motivation and ethics of all of those, that were involved. But, what about the media? Frenzy, that surrounded her case. It exasperated the complexities and sensationalism of her trials. She came to be described, as the monster in which we now know a movie was made to show this monstrous, figure devoid from humanity. But one reporter comments oddly that states something to the fact she said, "Don't, who don't use the states that don't use death penalty have less crime." Is she believing that the death penalty is not a deterrent? Plus, I began to listen to Eileen talking before her demise, and yes, even being a mass murderer, she has more concern for her victims' families and desire for God's will than any other inmate I have heard speak with facing the same fate. And I mean hundreds of them, it seems, especially since late. She even passed the SANE test given by a professional before the sentence was carried out. Um, but some of what she was saying had me thinking, what does it take to pass the sanity test? She also, after 12 years, was tired of how many cops, were out for money from paid interviews to movie deals, just from having talked to her or being involved in her case. She didn't like the way she was treated in jail, so she began to hurry up her departure by denying opportunities, for appeals. Um, how did she expect, though, to be treated in jail? Is my question after killing 7 people. And if you think about it, her being the first female serial killer, who wouldn't want to be known for her case, I mean, when you begin telling people, it's definitely going to bring out a lot of reactions from the public. Plus, how the officers must have felt having to work with her day in and day out. Eileen was very much a leader, and if she couldn't be in control, she didn't want any part of it. For Eileen to also refuse even solid foods as a protest against bad treatment in prison is considering, it's wild because how many lives, she took without remorse or consideration before, right? Starting with Richard Mallory, who possibly did rape her because he himself had a very dark history of violence towards women, which may have played a crucial role that broke her mentally and fueled her fury, even, that she began to execute these men that later crossed her path. I think it goes back further than that, and here's why. Aileen Carol Wuornos was born in February of 1956 and grew up in Michigan. Um, her parents, just 16, both abandoned her at birth. Her labeled father was known for child rape and killed himself in prison, and then her mother just kind of ran off. Her grandparents stepped in to raise her, but as a young child, her grandfather began to beat her until her grandma died, even while she was still young, of liver failure because she was a very heavy drinker. So, leaving her alone with her grandfather. He said very mean things to Eileen, like, that you should have never been born, that he even blamed Eileen for, grandma dying. Um, that, you know, she was this horrible person, yet began to have sex with her at just 14 years of age. And when she began pregnant, bearing his child, he threw her out. And with nowhere to go or a place of her own, she gave the baby up for adoption. Seems she learned early she can't trust anyone, nor could she depend on anyone either, you know. So then ultimately, this would start her turning dangerous. You know, those that were supposed to love her harmed her and then abandoned her, you know, in the worst way. Um, she had a brother that I don't know too much about. Um, what the relationship shows only two things, that it suggested incestual. Don't know if it was full blown sex or just molestation, but he was removed from the home, also was with the grandparents. When they were, excuse me, when there were allegations, you know, made, yet he wasn't far, maybe a neighbor's house, you know, he was like down the street because he still had a few encounters with Aileen till she left because, you know, she come to a point still, though very young, she couldn't take after a while sleeping outside in the snow, you know. She decided at some point to hitchhike to first Colorado and then Florida, where she felt she could at least be in a warmer climate. She had since learned that if she gave men sex, she could get, you know, things from them. This later would turn her into a full blown prostitute. Because sex, you know, came young, it also became violent too. You know, it was maybe 2 years later, she was arrested though for her first offense, which was driving under the influence and disorderly conduct, even dangerous discharge of a weapon, a 22 caliber gun, which remains relevant later because she rather took a liking and kept this weapon uh, near and dear to her, it seems. When she gets to Florida, she first actually gets married to a 69-year-old man named Lewis that was instantly doomed because she began to beat him and he filed for an annulment just weeks after they were married. She also receives word that her brother died suddenly of throat cancer, you know, making her feel even more alone. You know, she decided, or excuse me, she received $10,000 when he died, even though the relationship was toxic, it still broke her. Um, it even makes her angry, I think, and she blows through the money, you know, guns, cars, hotel rooms, and she decides she has to sustain this lifestyle and turns into an armed, you know, robber to do it. She was first arrested 1981 for stealing money and cigarettes from a store and spent a little over a year in jail. It did no not deter her. I think it actually pissed her off because she came out with guns blazing, it seemed, so to speak, because the next decade, her circumstances and her criminal activity picked up significantly. She even displayed versatility of her crimes as she went, you know, when she met Ty, the girl that made her fall in love. She fell hard. And it fueled her to want to provide for them, you know, both. And she decided she was going to be a full blown prostitute, always on the lookout, you know, for her next hit. So, sex, violence, and robbery became a revolving door. She then took it further when she enticed, then killed 7 men in 1 year, becoming America's first female serial killer. She already figured, you know, the Johns would have money on them and that she could use their car for a while and even go on to pawn whatever valuables she found on her person or in the car for cash. Yet later, when arrested, she calls it justifiable homicide when speaking to the media and declared her innocence. She went on saying they had all raped her. But did she just kill them for what they had both agreed to each time? Or maybe the first one did rape her and it pushed her to then carry out a deep hate and a revenge for any man that came in front of her path. You know, she was very clear and articulate in her testimony. She thought she knew what she was doing in a few cases, that she could even, fool the jury. Um, when she found out she was wrong, having, or excuse me, when she heard her first round of convictions and sentences to be the death penalty too, she was mad and clearly showed it in courtroom. She openly threatened the judge and the jury, saying that she hoped all of them got raped themselves and their family members. Remember Richard Mallory, the first one she killed? His widow, who was also interviewed, um, said she couldn't wait for her to meet old Sparky, which is a nickname, an old one, for the electric chair. As of today, 7 states allow the execution in this way to be carried out. It is primary in South Carolina, while it is an alternate method in the other 6 states. At least one of her first convictions, it was ordered for Aileen to get the electric chair, but she ended up dying via lethal injection. Even Ted Bundy, another serial killer who confessed to kidnapping, raping, and murdering 30 victims, was offered life imprisonment sentences. However, Aileen was never offered it. In 1976 is when Florida reinstated death penalty, and where she got most of her, uh, convictions and sentencings. So, an interview though with Geraldo in the 90s, after convicted, revealed she also was sent to jail for forged checks as she began her business, of stealing. She recalls even that with anger, claiming Trump charges. Um, was that, more resentment to fuel her greed? She began to see or go into and out of as many as 20 to 30 cars a day at the height of her career. She interacted with customers and agreeing to the quickie opportunities of making a lot of cash. I won't go into her rates of service. The most amusing question I feel Geraldo asked her, um, with a live audience, was, did you feel it necessary to kill the missionary? Which turned out to be one of her victims. She said she didn't know he was a missionary till after she killed him. The reality is, a victim is just that, no matter what they did for a living. And yet, she has no background system, to get to know first any of the men she killed. But later, we as the public with her come to know a retired police chief was also in her serial of numbered assassinations, then a child abuse investigator. And those two actually compared more as killing state officials uh, with her convictions. Then there was a shop owner, a construction worker, and two truck drivers. What I did find more compelling, though, is that each time she killed, it became more like overkill because she put more bullets into each victim than the last, emptying her 22 caliber gun. Because the first one, she shot twice. The second, she shot 4 times. The next one, 6 times, and so on. That to me speaks volumes of her wrath. Yet she said she was more intentional in robbing each of her victims before shooting each one of them to death. Here is some food for thought. Drugs are real, and so is taking the law in your own hands. I cannot stress enough that there is also rehab and anger management. Please don't ever think you can carry on with whatever issues you have going on unchecked. People have trauma. I get that and have even experienced that. However, if what you are feeling is so severe and you find yourself breaking the law, it most certainly, will end like every story you will ever read because it is a certainty. The ending will, with reality and justice, as well as institutions or death. I am so tired of hearing the defense of so many cases saying, well, this person had a terrible experience and or the worst childhood ever, so that is why they are out killing other people. It is so sad, and never to say anybody should have to go through that. However, are you feeling better after you take another innocent life? You know, feelings are not facts. That's why they are called feelings. If we could get more people to see that and even stop to think and deal with just their feelings in a more controlled state and or environment, we as a whole society could depend on a safer environment for everyone and everywhere, right? Okay, guys, that's all for today. Hope this helps. Bye.